Welcome. I'm so glad that you are here to listen to our presentation all on somatics and grief and traumatic grief. My name is Amy Pickett Williams, and I am the founder of Light Movement. Light Movement is a nonprofit that supports all people in all types of grief and loss. And Light stands for love and grief held together. There is always love or some sort of attachment. And when that disappears, we grieve. And the held together is that connection and co regulation we all need to do to support one another. We'll go through this presentation together. And as a reminder, this is also a trauma-informed nonprofit. And so please know that any tools we utilize together, you have a choice to lean in and be curious and also say, not today. So there are two slides we always read. They're very important to us in Light. The first is the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that our training platform operates on the ancestral and unceded lands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute peoples. We also acknowledge the ancestral and unceded lands of all locations where our students are located. We honor their enduring relationship with this land and recognize their resilience and contributions to somatic healing. As we connect, we commit to listening, learning, and collaborating with Indigenous communities to foster healing and reconciliation. And our inclusivity statement. Our trainings are dedicated to creating a safe and inclusive environment for all individuals seeking to expand their areas of expertise and gain more knowledge on somatic work. We welcome participants of all backgrounds, cultures, and identities, including but not limited to race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, ability, and socioeconomic status. We believe that healing is a collective journey, and we strive to honor diverse perspectives and experiences in our somatic healing practices. We are committed to ensuring that everyone feels seen, heard, and valued as they engage in our workshop sessions. So as I shared, we are a nonprofit and we support all people with all types of grief and loss. Our mission is to bring grief support and education to all people through somatic-based, accessible, evidence-informed practices. And our vision is to create a world of peaceful communities where no one grieves alone. Within Light, as you can see, there our logo that looks like a plant or a tree. It's also the vagus nerve, and you'll notice the top two branches go to both sides. Part of our work in our nonprofit is supporting people that are actively grieving, which all of us grieve at different times in our life. And the other part, which is why I'm here today, is to support providers to better understand how to support themselves and others within grief. And our four goals are to remind people that they are not alone in their grief, to teach the science of grief and somatic tools, to support mind-body integration, leading to meaning making and purpose in grief. It's important to say that we don't believe things happen for a reason in our nonprofit, but we do know that once we've experienced something, how we know we need to integrate it in order to find meaning and continuing on. Our third is providing additional support and resources to help people in their grief. So we connect with many other groups that support others because we don't do everything. And our fourth is to stand in solidarity with all people and all types of grief and loss, and always with a social justice lens. A little more about me. I've been doing this grief work for over 25 years, and I found that the somatic lens throughout the years is the #1 way to work with our grief. These are some of the areas that we focus on within Light Movement, and we'll be going through a lot of these together. But it's important to note that this is a mind-body approach, and for some people, it's a mind-body, spirit, soul approach. It's connecting all parts to who we are. And it's also important to know that we are all faces of light. While I started this nonprofit with my own personal and professional experiences with grief, we know that every single one of us experiences loss. So we hope that everyone will be able at some point to find that support through that somatic lens. And we know that light movement is able to do that for others. And there's also many different types of grief. To save time in this presentation, I won't go through all of them, but sometimes people are curious about a few. So I'd like to share. One of them is parasocial grief, and that is the loss of someone famous. So sometimes when a singer dies, we really grieve because we believe that their songs so were about who we were as people. I think back to Princess Diana and and for many people, President Kennedy, where there was just this intense sense of loss. Prolonged grief disorder, I always like to bring in, especially for clinicians, that is in our DSM. It's important for you all to know that I actually never like to diagnose that because I never ever see grief as a disorder. I would much rather diagnose someone with adjustment than with prolonged grief disorder. And within the DSM, they have timelines on how long you're supposed to grieve. And really, it's so individual that I stay clear of that. And then the other piece that is also really important to bring up is burnout. And I'll talk a little bit about that today, which is also a different type of grief, and it impacts our nervous system in very similar ways. So I'm going to invite us to kind of center ourselves as we prepare for this presentation. And what we know with grief is that it is always triggered by the five senses. We remember something, we smell, or we see something or someone, and it brings up that loss of saying, that person looks just like my loved one, something that we are just aware of. We also know that glimmers are also a beautiful way to work with our grief. So those are those moments, those temporary moments of peace and joy, even if it's just so slight, that calms our nervous system. So I'm going to invite you to go to a place of glimmers for you. I invite you to go to a place where you have been, that brought you peace, that brought you joy. And if you can't think of a place that you actually have been, maybe there's a picture that you've always said, I want to go. And notice I'm saying peaceful place. I'm not saying safe place, because safe can be triggering for some people that have not experienced a lot of safety in their life. So my eyes are closed, as you can see. I invite you to also close your eyes or slowly gaze down and place one hand at your heart center and the other hand on the other side. And we're going to begin to butterfly tap together. And this peaceful place may be outside in nature, maybe in the ocean, the mountains, the forest, the lake. It may be inside a cozy cabin or even inside the coziness of your own home or bedroom. And for one little guy I worked with, it was the playland at McDonald's. So wherever that is, I invite you to take a few breaths and just bring yourself to that space. You're welcome to continue to tap through this little exercise together. And once you are there, I invite you to look around in your mind's eye, maybe even doing a circle, noticing everything in front of you, on the sides of you, and behind you. Your eyes may even gaze up and gaze down. You may notice that you're there by yourself or you're there with other people. There's no right or wrong way to look at this. And now I invite you to notice what it feels like in that space. What is the temperature? What are the sensations of what you are touching? Are you standing on something, sitting on something, or lying down on it? What does it feel like on your skin? And if you were to reach your hand out, what could you touch? What is the texture? And now notice what you hear around you. And if it's the sound of silence, that's also totally valid as well. Unknown caller. And lastly, I invite you to notice what you smell and taste. And if there's nothing there, that's okay too. And now I invite you to begin to massage and rub your hands together until they've created heat. And if you're wearing glasses, I'd suggest you maybe take them off. And once your hands have created some heat, I invite you to place them on your closed eyelids and breathe in about 5 more breaths, noticing the sensations, the 5 senses, and bringing yourself to that space one more time, really integrating it in. And then when you're ready, you may begin to gently massage along your eyebrows, your temples, dropping your fingers to your jawline, and drop your tongue from the roof of your mouth. So much of the time we hold so much tension and pressure in our jaws. Just dropping your tongue opens up the jaw. It may even promote a yawn. And then gently massage around your earlobes and around the outside of your ears. We hold so many acupressure points in this area. It helps us get back into that calming spot. And maybe even pinch the tragus, which is that little flap right in front of your ears. Just gently, gentle massage. And then maybe the concha, which is that shell shape just outside the ear canal. Gently massage there too. And then lastly, place your middle finger on the outside of your ears, kind of by your jawline, and your second pointer finger behind your ears. So it's like a little V. And then just gently massage down, maybe keeping that tongue away from the roof of your mouth. Do that a few times. It's gentle. And then when you're ready, you can begin to open your eyes, take a look around the space you are right now. I always like to notice the space between the ceiling and the wall, that line. For me, it's shaped like a little peak in the room that I am right now. Looking around, maybe look out the window. You may notice there's a ruler behind me. That's my kids, their height. So I'm not actually 4 feet sitting. Just take a moment, bring yourself back here. And this is a beautiful tool we can utilize for ourselves when we're feeling some intense emotions or for the people that we work with, whether they're clients or students or patients or friends, family members. This is a beautiful somatic tool that we started off with today. And we'll continue. That tapping, that bilateral movement is one of the somatic frameworks we'll be talking about later. It utilizes both sides of our body and both sides of our brain to help us integrate experiences. And in this experience, it was a place of bringing that peace and that calm. So Earl Grolman says, grief is not a disorder, a disease, or a sign of weakness. It is an emotional, physical, and spiritual necessity, the price you pay for love. Again, the reason we grieve is that belief and that experience that we are so connected to it. And then when it disappears, our bodies react in a very healthy, normal way. And part of that is that attachment theory. John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth studied attachment. And when we do connect with that someone or that something, there are different parts of our brain that light up. And when the brain lights up and it brings in those triggers, it's those experiences that we have. And grief is not exclusive to just humans. I highly encourage 2 TED Talks. Barbara King studied animals, and she studied all types of animals, including ducks. And what she found is that they all experience grief. Elephants will return to the spot of the death of their loved one for years on end. There was a mama whale when her calf died. She carried that baby along for 3 weeks before she was able to let it drop into the ocean deep to below. And Dr. Zoe Donaldson studied prairie voles. Now, prairie voles are creatures that mate for life. And she studied that when she would bring them together and then separate them, and then the partner would tap to be able to open the door to get back into the cage, she would notice that when they were separated, there was a part of their brain that would light up called the nucleus accumbens. That is the place where there's attachment. And that is true for humans as well. Now, many of us have all heard of the beautiful work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Now, an interesting thing about Elizabeth is that she studied terminally ill patients, not the bereaved. And so her stages theory fit with someone going through the dying process. And if she was with us today, she would say, people morphed my study to not how I studied it. People morphed it to say that when we were experiencing grief, we also went through like 5 stages, and people then would add on to more of those stages. But that was not Elizabeth's study. What we actually know is that grief is not a linear progression. And for almost all of us, it's that experience on the right. We go all over the place with our grief. And there is not a beginning, and there is not an end. Another very popular theory utilized in grief support groups is the dual processing model. We focus on the loss and the grief work and the experience, and we also have to tend to restoration oriented, all the other places in our life. We still have jobs, we still maybe have kids, we have to do all these different things. And so we learn how to oscillate or pendulate back and forth. Now, a piece that is missing from that theory and so many other theories is how we utilize the body with this. Growing around grief is one of my most favorite theories out there. It was an article written by Lois Tonkin in 1996. She was working with clients similar to what I do. I work with a lot of families who've experienced the death of a child. And what she found, her client said to her was, my grief never shrinks. So if you look at that top line, the grief, that red circle is slowly shrinking. And she recognized that that was not the case for her, this client. And Lois then recognized that that's not the case really for any of us, especially those significant losses. But instead, we learn to grow around our grief. So the grief stays the same. It will always be a part of us, but we continue to grow. And the most beautiful painting, this was done by a 16-year-old whose best friend died of brain cancer. And I asked her to paint a tree and a cactus, and that showed scars. And what we know is that in reality, when we tend to our grief and we get connection and co-regulation with others, that scar that maybe took up the whole tree or cactus at the beginning begins to not take up the whole tree or cactus, not because it shrinks, it doesn't shrink, but the tree or cactus continue to grow around our grief. So I've brought up this word somatic many times, and I've said that it's the mind, body, and for some, mind, body, spirit, soul. Soma is a living organism in its wholeness. It's the connection of all parts. As a clinical social worker, we see that as systems perspective. There's many parts to the system, but they all embody each other. We also know that grieving is a full body experience. I always like to share the story. I worked in pediatric oncology for many years and worked with a number of kiddos that had osteosarcoma. And so they had to have legs amputated, sometimes arms because of the cancer. And we've all heard of phantom limb pain. And so children obviously attached to that limb would feel that pain even when the arm or leg was no longer there. But the part I always found very interesting is I had parents come to me and say, I'm feeling that pain too. And for all of us that are parents can relate to that intense pain when our child has experienced such intense loss. So the parents were just as much in many ways attached to that leg as the child. And so that pain was felt by both. Mary Frances O'Connor is out of U of A, and she has studied the brain and how the brain grieves. She's noticed, again, connecting to that nucleus accumbens, that yearning for the other. Sometimes we call that continuing bonds, where we feel like in reality that person has not really died yet. And many of us know that experience. And is grief always traumatic? The answer is no. But there is always, always grief in trauma. There's just not always trauma in grief. It becomes traumatic grief when we get stuck in a nervous system state. We get stuck in that fight flight response, or we get stuck in that place of like, I just don't care anymore and I don't want to get out of bed. We call that dorsal state. And that fight flight is sympathetic state. And if there was one thing that has helped the families that I've worked with who've experienced the death of a child, is something that Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor discovered. What she discovered, she's a neuroscientist, is that when we allow ourselves to feel that intense feeling of loss, that grief that's within our whole body, if we can allow ourselves to ride that tsunami wave and feel the feelings, it will typically last about 90 seconds, and then it will dissipate into calm. Now, it's important to note that grief isn't about one tsunami wave and then the ocean is fully calm. We know the ocean is never fully calm. It's not one wave and then it goes flat. But there's a break in between each tsunami wave. And the person that beautifully spoke of this without even knowing about the 90-second rule was Viktor Frankl, who, as you all know, lived in the Holocaust, experienced the Holocaust, was a concentration camp survivor, and also went on to become a clinical psychologist. He said, between the stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So we have choice to allow ourselves to ride the wave, as hard and scary and difficult as it may be. And we also have choice to utilize these tools between each of the next tsunami waves. That's the beauty of somatics, is they can help us when we're experiencing our trauma, and they can also help us in between when life is okay, but help us expand how we can work with that grief in the future. So I'm going to go into a little bit of science of grief. I geek out a little bit about this. So this is a very simplistic model of the triune brain, 3 parts of our brain. We have that front part, that neocortex, that includes the prefrontal cortex, which is our thinking brain. It helps us strategize, reason. We have the limbic system, which is that mid part of our brain where our amygdala lives, where the nucleus accumbens lives, and so many other pieces. And we're going to go into the limbic system a bit more. And then we have that reptilian brain, which is that instinctual survival. and it governs our basic stuff that we need, like digestion and breathing and circulation and reproduction, and it executes that fight flight response. Now, we know within grief, they've done a lot of fMRI studies that almost every part of the brain lights up when we experience grief. In particular, notice that mid-limbic region, the anterior cingulate cortex is the place we feel pain. Now, what's interesting is that lights up significantly when we experience intense loss. So we all know that there have been times when our grief is so intense, we feel physiologically, we feel pain. Our heart hurts. For me, I know I get migraines after my dad died. Many will have belly aches and like feeling like you have an ulcer, tension. A couple other places that are interesting is the amygdala, which is again that protection of when we feel like there's a fight flight response, it reacts and goes to protect us. But the part that's also fascinating about the amygdala is it also is trained to notice experiences of joy. So if earlier, as we were talking about the triggers that we experience with grief, but we also can experience those glimmers. Deb Dana, who works alongside Dr. Stephen Porges, came up with that term of glimmers. It's those moments, little moments where we can find joy or peace. The hippocampus is that place that also helps us with executive functioning. And that obviously goes way offline when we're experiencing grief. And the hypothalamus is a fascinating part of our endocrine system that connects our nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, with our endocrine system. And so what will happen is we experience something that triggers that fight flight response, and our hypothalamus releases a hormone called CRH. It then connects into our pituitary gland, which converts it into ACTH. And then that then goes to our adrenal glands, which are just above our kidneys, to release cortisol. And it's a never-ending cycle. Now, if we stay in that sympathetic response for long periods of time, what can happen is our cortisol levels will stay really, really, really high. And if our cortisol levels stay really, really high, it can contribute to experiences of diabetes, cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, rheumatoid, infectious disease. Now, I'm not going to say it causes it, but it can be a contributing factor. So these tools that we utilize that can help us calm our nervous system, that can help us get back into our window of tolerance. Dr. Daniel Siegel came up with something called the window of tolerance. It's that place where when we're in that balanced place, or what we call parasympathetic state, we can feel like we can focus, we can find connection with others. And that's that orange line. Now, notice that orange line. I had fun with highlighters, but notice that orange line. It's not stagnant, right? We still ride it and we can pop up into sympathetic and dorsal, which I'll go into in a little bit. But that black line is when we're experiencing intense grief and sometimes traumatic grief. Notice the black line at the top, that first plateau. That's that stuck place. That's traumatic grief when we can't get out of that sympathetic state. And we may then, when we get stuck in that sympathetic state for so long, we actually go back and fall into a dorsal state. Dorsal state is that hypoarousal, that place of like, I can't get out of bed. I know one woman I worked with whose child died of cancer. She hung out in her closet for hours and hours on end. She just said, I can't keep going. And so that's that traumatic grief, either stuck in sympathetic, stuck in dorsal. Now you may be curious, there's a few other places there that words that I mentioned in there. So a place of still in that traumatic space between balanced and sympathetic is appeasement. Appeasement is when we feel like we have to tend to everybody else in order to continue to survive. I'll give an example. After my dad died, it was during COVID, and I felt like I had to care for our three kids. I had therapy clients. My mom was really struggling because they had been married almost 50 years. And it was this constant, I've got to care for everyone else. And I had to contain my grief. Now, what happened is I did okay during the day, so I thought, but it was at night when the nightmares came, when I would imagine in my dreams that there were hundreds of people trying to get into our house saying, Amy, Amy, help me. And I would literally sleepwalk to our balcony and as if to scream, stop. And my sweet husband would have to say, Amy, you're just having a nightmare. So that was a state of appeasement. And then there's a fawn response, which is between balanced and dorsal. Fawn is where we feel like in order to survive, we have to be able to people please everybody. The difference between appeasement and fawn with Dr. Stephen Porges is appeasement is it feels like you just have to continue to do it, but it's not about pleasing anyone because it's not about them injuring me per se. Fawn is more about that if we have to please people, we have to support someone, we have to take care of someone so that they won't hurt us. And an example of that is I worked with a little guy whose dad likely killed his mom. It was never proven in court. Somehow he ended up getting to stay with his father, and he was terrified that he too would get hurt by his father. And so he constantly was in a people pleasing state. Now, on the opposite end, there are these substates that are places of support and coping. So that between balanced and window of tolerance, balanced and sympathetic is playful. Now, we all know children do a beautiful job of play. And then so they're active, right? But they're still in that balanced state. And then intimacy is between balanced and dorsal. And that's not just sexual intimacy. That's also nursing a child, a baby. That's holding a pet, petting your dog. That's holding the holding the hand of a friend, giving a friend a hug. That's that intimacy piece. So I'm going to invite us just to take a moment and notice as we're bringing up all this pretty big, heavy stuff, just take a moment and notice where when you are experiencing grief, and you don't need to go to a place of intense grief that you've experienced, but maybe it was like when you moved away from something or ended a job, maybe finished college, there's still a little bit of loss, right? You're transitioning. And just take a moment and notice where you feel that in your body. Notice if you feel tension. Notice if you were to bring a color to that space, what color is it? What's the size? And you may find as you're doing this, you may even move your body a little bit. I know when I just now brought up a time, I was remembering when I was finishing up a job, I felt a lot of tightness in my shoulders, and it was a good thing because I was moving on to something else, but I also had some sadness. And so I'm noticing that I'm dropping my chin to chest, just feeling the feelings, right ear to right shoulder, left ear to left shoulder. Just notice. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes if they were closed. And as we do these somatic tools that I'm going to be bringing up in the next few minutes, I'm going to invite you to notice if there's any change in your body as you do them. So a little more science. So the vagus nerve, which is that picture in the middle, is the 10th cranial nerve. It's a very, very long nerve. It runs basically from our brain stem, but has connected nerve endings that go around our ears and into our face, goes through our midline all the way down to the lowest part of our torso, impacting many organs in our body. Now, what's kind of cool is for those of us that are into Eastern philosophy, the chakras are also midline, and our endocrine system is also midline. And so there's a connection of all three. And the mom of the 16-year-old girl drew this picture for me, and you can see that connection. They're all midline interconnected within our body. Now, the vagus nerve is fascinating. It communicates brain to body and body to brain. But the part that's so fascinating is it only communicates brain to body about 20% of the time and body to brain about 80% of the time. So even though I was trained as a talk therapist over 25 years ago, talking, I now know, only goes so far. We have to utilize our body and notice what sensations in our body and work with our body, which will then allow us to work with our grief. Dr. Stephen Porges studied this with our vagus nerve, and he came up with something called polyvagal theory. The whole idea is there's different nervous system states. When we're in that intense sympathetic state, it's like that steam engine. When we're in that dorsal state, it's like blocks of ice, we just can't move. And when we're in that ventral vagal state, what he calls that balanced state, it's like that glass of water. Now, all of you, I'm sure, have heard sympathetic, parasympathetic. Sympathetic, again, is above that window, fight, flight. Parasympathetic is in that window. But many of you may not know that actually dorsal state is also a parasympathetic state. Now, again, none of these nervous system states are bad or wrong. They're what we do to survive and our experiences in life. But our hope is we can work to learn how to continue to get into that balanced state even when life happens. Part of that is learning how to get back into it. But as I mentioned earlier, that preventative piece between those tsunami waves, we also want to learn how to expand that window. So when I'm working with a client, potentially their window is the size of an attic window, or maybe even the size of little window, the size of a mouse house. And so they're riding outside that window all the time, and they're not regulated with their emotions and their feelings. Part of our work is learning how we can expand that window to a sliding glass door. So the next time that they're riding these waves, they may not pop outside of it quite as much or stay stuck outside of it. And as we work with these somatic tools, we also have to recognize the mood that we're in. So for example, if I am beyond angry about something and someone says, Amy, let's sit down and do a meditation, I can guarantee you I would walk out the room. Just like if I'm in bed and I just cannot face the world and someone comes up to me and says, Amy, let's go for a walk, I would ask them to leave my room. I would ask them to leave and walk out the room. So we have to meet the mood. So if I'm more activated, I'm going to need to do more active somatic practices. And if I'm really stuck in that dorsal state, I'm going to need to do some gentle practices. And three key aspects or frameworks of somatic work are contraction, expansion, pendulation, bilateral movements, and vagus nerve stimulation. And we'll go through these all together. And Rumi was a poet from about the 1400th century and 14th century. And I truly believe he was a somatic therapist, but didn't know it. He said, and this is one of the most famous quotes that he wrote, your hand opens and closes and opens and closes. If it were always a fist or always stretched open, you would be paralyzed. Your deepest presence is in every small contracting and expanding. The two as beautifully balanced and coordinated as bird wings. So what we know when we're experiencing traumatic grief, especially, we can get stuck where we just can't do anything, or we'll expand out so intensely that our bodies aren't even ready to do that. Part of our work is learning to do both. We pendulate back and forth. That's part of that healthy process of working with our grief. So let's practice together. If you'd like, I invite you to place your elbows parallel to shoulders, fingertips reaching to sky. Inhaling in, eyes gazing up. And then as you begin to exhale, contract forearms together, palms together, head down. And then play with that for about 3 or 4 breaths. Inhaling, expanding out. Exhaling, contracting in. Back and forth. Now, as you're doing this, notice what else is happening in your body. We naturally expand and contract in our body systems every moment of every day. We do that with our breath. Our lungs expand and contract. Our hearts expand and contract. And in reality, nature does that too. If you think about flower buds, they expand and contract. The moon expands up and contracts down. They're all beautiful tools that are utilized in nature every day. Ocean waves expand and contract. They're all part of our natural process. Now that bilateral movement is the second one that we did earlier, right? Back and forth. Now let's think about there are other beautiful bilateral movement tools, just like there's other contraction and expansion tools. Other bilateral tools could be walking, running, swimming. When we cook, right? We use both sides of our body. In the contraction and expansion, my oldest son is a big competitive swimmer that will swim in college. Think about that. Breaststroke is expanding and contracting as well. And the third one is vagus nerve stimulation. When we stimulate the vagus nerve, it can help us get back into that balanced ventral vagal parasympathetic state. So I'd love for you to do this with me. You'll place your fingertips at your eyebrows, second fingers, your middle fingers at your closed eyelids, but not yet. You got to see where your other fingers go. Your ring fingers at the side of your nose, your pinky fingers at the side of your lips, and then block your ears with your thumbs. And what you'll do is you're going to hum Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star or another song that has high tone and low tone. And you'll do it slowly. So it'll sound like this. It'll sound, and just go through it. No one will hear you because everyone's ears are closed. And I'll take about 20, 30 seconds. I'll be quiet and then I'll speak loudly. So even if you're in a room with someone right now, I promise you, you won't be doing it on your own. And just begin to hum and notice what it feels like with the different tones. And we'll begin now. Nice job, everybody. Nice job. Now, I would be curious when you're listening to this presentation. I always do this exercise at every conference webinar I do. And a fascinating thing that tends to happen is that if I give this presentation in the morning, typically people find the higher and the mid tones most soothing. At lunchtime, it tends to be mid tone to lower tones. And in the evening, it tends to be lower tones. Now, that's not true all the time because everyone is different, but it's just an interesting little thing. So I'm just curious, you all have to talk about that together. So not only is vibration stimulates that vagus nerve through humming, but a longer exhale does too. A beautiful tool you can use with children and adults is the 5 birthday candles. Now, the thing with the 5 birthday candles is it's not always taught in a way that can help with calming, because typically when we blow out a birthday candle, what do? We breathe in and we blow very, very quickly. That's not going to tend to bring us back into that balanced state. So instead, I invite people to slowly let the flame dance. So you breathe in, and then you slowly let it dance. And eventually it may fade out. And so that allows that slower piece. You'll see that pinwheel as well, just slowly blowing. So the pinwheel, those fun little pinwheels, if you blow really fast, nothing happens. It makes noise, doesn't move. You have to slowly blow as if you're blowing through a straw. Actually, let me go back. A couple other great breathing tools is box breathing. Box breathing is a great tool where you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold for 4. These are great tools, especially more in that dorsal state or preventative tools. One key aspect with box breathing, we always want to count backwards when we're working with someone. And the reason for that is even if you say you're only going to count to 4, if they're in a trauma state, they may forget and then it won't feel comforting to them. Instead, it'll feel scary. So just counting backwards, everyone knows 1 is the end. And if someone has breathing issues, so let's say they have severe asthma or COPD, breath tools may not be helpful for them. And that's why we bring in other tools as well. Now, going back or going to our next slide, if you're feeling more amped up, that sympathetic activation, what do we want to do? We want to meet that mood. So we want to dance, we want to shake, we want to get our body going. And I would encourage you to do that for about 30 seconds, even up to a minute, really, really moving your body. And then when that feels complete, standing in mountain pose and noticing the sensations, that mindful moment. Oh, my breath is a little more intense. My heart rate is beating faster. I'm tingling. My temperature has increased. Really bringing yourself and your clients to that place, or your patients or your students to that place to notice what's happening in their body in that moment. And then again, that dorsal state can be really helpful of just gentle breathing. 3-part breath can be really helpful. You can place one hand at your low belly, one hand at mid belly, one hand at upper chest. And you'll slowly breathe in 1/3 low belly, 1/3 mid, 1/3 upper. Take one more sip in, 1/3 upper out, 1/3 mid out, 1/3 low out. Let all that stale air out. And then feel free to repeat that as many times as you'd like. And also changing your temperature. Holding an ice cube, splashing cool water on your face can also sometimes help us get out of that dorsal state. Now, at the beginning of the session today, I taught you all after we did the peaceful place, I suggested rubbing along your ears and the concha, that shell shape outside the ear canal, and the tragus. These are all nerve endings that help us connect with that balanced state. They connect to that vagus nerve, which help us when we're stimulating it, bring us back into that parasympathetic, balanced, or ventral vagal state. And acupressure points are also great when we're especially not wanting to move. Life is hard. And in Chinese medicine, the lung points are where we hold grief. And so the 2 points that I want to share with you today, the first one you'll see is just below the thumb. Now, those of us that get motion sick know that mid-point wrist can be really helpful when we're experiencing nausea. But on the other side, right by the thumb, work your finger down. It'll feel very tender. Most tender points are acupressure points. And you just gently massage here. You can do both sides, one side and then the other. And then the other beautiful tool or acupressure point is if you follow your fingers along your collarbone, try right where your shoulder blade meets it. And then go back along the collarbone just about an inch towards the center, and then drop where that red dot is in the picture. You'll find a tender spot here. This is another wonderful point for grief. This is also a really good point for anxiety. You can do them both at the same time as well. You may hear one of our dogs in the background. He's, I think, in that sympathetic state. He sees something, he's excited. And then self-havening is that gentle massage along our body, our face, just bringing us to this present moment of saying, you've got this, you've got this. Now, it's important to know anytime we talk about somatics and grief, there always is social justice. Almost all somatic tools come from indigenous communities, African communities, those in Asia, and we need to honor their traditions. Unfortunately, yoga has done a very poor job of popularizing it. And so when we speak of yoga and these different practices, it's important to honor where they originally came from. and to not extract them and co-modify them, which means just cherry picking techniques without understanding their cultural significance. And we don't want to ever turn these practices into trends or products. Within the different somatic tools and somatic frameworks, not only is there yoga and these breath techniques, but there's also, you can swim, you can do yoga, you can walk and hike, you can cook, you can garden, you can dance. All of these are utilizing these tools every day, and it's the intentionality behind it. Painting and journaling and singing and drumming and pottery all utilize these beautiful tools. And earthing and grounding, that picture went up a little bit. This is a wonderful tool where you can go outside. We know that the electromagnetic waves of the earth are neutral and they're healthy. And unfortunately, the beauty of these cell phones and different electronics have brought us to a point where the electromagnetic waves and ions are off. So if you can go outside barefoot and just stand on the earth, not cement, but dirt or rocks or tree or grass, or lay down on them, it can help us bring to that balanced state. And even if you don't believe in the electromagnetic stuff, what we know is the beauty is that we can just be there and utilize our five senses that can help us ground. And then connecting and co-regulating with others, bringing us back. What we know is when we're in that ventral vagal state, that balanced state, we have the ability to connect with others, whether that's humans or pets or even little lizards. Little picture on that bottom right side, which then allow us to hold space for one another. With animals, there's a beautiful animal assisted therapy tool. If you have a bigger dog, like this size, maybe even a little smaller, you can sit side to side with that dog and you will end up matching breath, co-regulating breath. If you have a smaller dog or cat, not puppy or kitten, because they're faster breath techniques and faster heart rates, you can place them on your belly or your chest, and the two of you will start to connect breath. So they will help co-regulate you, you will help co-regulate them. And when we're working with grief, it's always important to note that we need to meet the basics. With nourishment, so much of the time in normal life, it's recommended we eat about every 3 hours of protein and a carb. I'm a vegan, and so I'll eat nut butters or hummus. When in normal circumstances, if we choose to eat like a candy bar and we're not experiencing grief or traumatic grief, then we'll get a sugar high and it'll feel good. Unfortunately, that sugar high when we're experiencing trauma can also bring us and feel that sympathetic state of a lot of anxiety. And then that crash can drop us into that dorsal state. So in order to avoid that, we just don't eat those unhealthy things, and we try to do every 3 hours. Sleep can be really challenging. So having a good sleep hygiene, going to bed around the same time every night, finding a somatic tool. There's a lot of breathing techniques that can help. I'd encourage you to even Google alternate nostril breathing. I'll quickly just show you place your thumb and push it in on your right nostril. You breathe in through your left. You breathe out through your left. Breathe in through your left. And then with your ring finger, block the other side and breathe out. And breathe in. And block and breathe out. Breathe in. And block and breathe out. And you can continue that. I encourage that breath exercise to happen while you're seated or lying down, because sometimes it can bring a little bit of lightheadedness, which can be helpful, obviously, for sleep as well. And then exercise, even just 20 minutes of utilizing that bilateral movement can be really, really helpful as well. Now, many of you are going to be and are working with people that are experiencing grief. And I always think it's important to bring through a few of the things not to ever say, Comparing is not a good time. It's not a good time to compare when someone is telling their story and you're bearing witness to them. So sharing your own experience, not usually helpful when someone is in that moment, maybe at a different time. Advice, not helpful. The at least is probably the most hurtful one I've ever heard. At least you have more children. At least you can get another pet. At least you could find someone else to date. Um, those are the most harmful, I believe. Focusing on the bright side, they're in a better place. You can always, you can always have more kids. I understand. Now, while no one can ever truly understand someone else's experience, we can connect to their feelings, but their experience is unique. I know how you feel. You're handling this better than I expected. It's not that bad. You're not over it yet. And now here are some things to say. I'm so sorry. I'll say I'm so sorry can be a little bit on both sides. Some people really like that, and some people respond in a really intense way of say, "What are you sorry about? Wasn't you that lost their dad?" So that one's a unique one. You could kind of go both ways. If you would like to tell me about the person or the experience, I would love to know more. I would love to just sit with you if you would like. You do not need to say anything. Grief has no expiration date. Whatever you are feeling is okay. There are no words. You are not going crazy. And I'll continue to check in and mean it. Now, I'm going to say the positive thing about these cell phones. You can put on your calendar to check in with someone every week, every month, and even every year. So much of the time, after a couple months, people are not getting check-ins like they need to. So that is the beauty of these cell phones. It's very easy to set an alarm to do a check-in. And then other resources. Support groups can be helpful with grief. For some, their faith communities can be very, very helpful with their grief. And I want to really honor Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who said the most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These persons have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep loving concern. And so as we utilize these tools and as we get support from others, we learn how to integrate our grief so that we can continue to grow around it. That is what integration is all about. And from there, we can find meaning from our experiences. For me, it was, I'd been doing grief work for many years. And for me, after my dad died, it was starting light movement. For all of you, it might be the job that you're in today. It might be saying, I want to volunteer in other ways to support people that are going through the one human condition none of us are immune from, which is grief. If you're curious about us, you can always go to our website, lightmovement.com. We have workshops and classes that we offer regularly. We have a couple of yoga classes going, a sewing class, hiking with grief. We at times have art and journaling. Every year we have our night to illuminate grief that is always on the winter solstice. It's a chance globally to stand in solidarity for all people and all types of grief and loss. We have a grief retreat that's every December that's in the beautiful Black Forest outside Colorado Springs. We have a continuing education training where you can get 30 hours to really learn so much about this. And you don't even need the CEs if you're just curious. And we have a trauma and grief informed yoga teacher training. The beauty is the first 30 hours is part of also the yoga teacher training for people to really understand grief and trauma. I always like to finish with this beautiful poem by Jan Richardson that I discovered right when light movement started from a friend. And I said, this is light. And she says, how the light comes. I cannot tell you how the light comes. What I know is that it is more ancient than imagining, that it travels across an astounding expanse to reach us, that it loves searching out what is hidden, what is lost, what is forgotten or in peril or in pain, that it has a fondness for the body, for finding its way toward flesh, for tracing the edges of form, for shining forth through the eye, the hand, the heart. I cannot tell you how the light comes, but that it does, that it will, that it works its way into the deepest dark that enfolds you, though it may seem long ages in coming or arrive in a shape you did not foresee. And so may we this day turn ourselves toward it. May we lift our faces to let it find us. May we bend our bodies to follow the arc it makes. May we open and open more and open still to the blessed light that comes. Thank you all so much for listening to this presentation. I hope to maybe see you at some point. You can always check out info on our website, and there's even a volunteer tab if that interests you. But please take these tools, utilize them for yourself to help prevent burnout, to help decrease burnout experiences, and to help all the people that you are sharing and supporting your experience and professionalism with. Continue to let your light shine, and thank you so much. Take good care.